Welcome back now for the news in detail, and we start from India, where nearly 2 million people have been rendered stateless after the Assam state government excluded them from its list of citizens. Assam's BJP-controlled administration says it plans to deport undocumented Muslim immigrants from Bangladesh. Assam's population is 34% Muslims, the second highest of any Indian state. Responding to the decision, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan said the international community should take notice of the ethnic cleansing of Muslims in India. He said India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir is also a part of a wider policy to target Muslims. Still in India, the economic growth in India has fallen to its lowest level since Prime Minister Modi took power 5 years ago. The National Statistical Office reports GDP growth for the 3 months up to June dipped to 5%. The growth rate for the same period last year was 8%. Government data also shows a rapid deceleration from 5.8% growth in the first quarter of this year. But the Modi administration has sought to deflect criticism of its economic policies.
This has been on account of both exogenous and endogenous factors. The government is quite alive to the situation, especially global headwinds arising out of deceleration in the developed economies and Sino-American trade conflict has contributed to the slowdown.
Many economists believe India's GDP will continue to exhibit negative growth rate this year also. Now, moving on, Human Rights Watch says India's clampdown in occupied Kashmir has deprived people of vital healthcare facilities. In a report, the rights body said Kashmiris no longer have access to life-saving treatments such as chemotherapy and dialysis. Human Rights Watch said the Indian occupied Kashmir is deteriorating with time. It condemned the arrest of Kashmiri doctors by Indian occupation forces. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says people of occupied Kashmir are looking for strong support of the Islamic world. In a telephone call with United Arab Emirates Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, Khan briefed him on the situation in occupied Valley. Speaking to UAE Crown Prince Zayed over the phone, Khan said the international community should help in lifting the curfew. The Prime Minister said India has intensified ceasefire violations along the line of control after revoking occupied Kashmir special status. The two leaders agreed to remain closely engaged to address the situation. Now, 24 people died when a bus plunged into a stream after a bridge collapsed in a remote area of northern Pakistan. Police say the vehicle was carrying a wedding party when it fell into a gushing channel in the upper Kohistan region. Civil defense officials says the victims belong to the same tribe. Rescue workers are finding it difficult to recover their bodies because of the poor telecommunications in the mountainous area. US President Donald Trump says Washington had good negotiations with the Taliban, but a deal has not yet been reached. President Trump says the number of troops in Afghanistan will be reduced to 8,600. Earlier, the Taliban said they are close to a deal with the United States as the final points are being discussed in the negotiations. The US and Taliban are engaged in their 9th round of peace talks in Doha to end the 18-year-long Afghan war. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's government says the Taliban have launched an assault on the northwestern city of Kunduz. Presidential spokesman Sadiq Siddiqui says insurgents have taken up positions in residential areas of the city. It says government forces are fighting to expel Taliban units that launched a multi-pronged attack at midnight. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid has described the attacks as large-scale. This is the third time Kunduz has come under attack since the Taliban briefly captured it in 2015. Moving on now, a U.S. serviceman has been killed during combat operations in Afghanistan. NATO has reported the latest American casualty, while U.S. diplomats are in Doha negotiating a peace deal with the Taliban. NATO's Resolute Support Mission says the latest death raises the number of U.S. soldiers killed in Afghanistan this year to 15. 2 others died last week. 14,000 U.S. soldiers are currently deployed in the country. The United States has set a trial date for the alleged master planner of the 9/11 attacks, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He will be tried along with 4 other men at a military court in Guantanamo Bay from January 2021. The men are charged with war crimes, including terrorism and the murder of 3,000 people. The 9/11 Commission report named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the principal architect of the September 2001 attacks. Moving on to Russia, which says Syrian government forces will unilaterally cease fire in Idlib de-escalation zone from Saturday. Russia's defense ministry urged Syrian militant groups to join the ceasefire. In the meantime, the UN Security Council is considering a draft resolution calling for a truce in northwestern Syria. Earlier, Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said Russia has assured Ankara there will be no attacks on its posts in northwest Syria. Cavusoglu said continued attacks by Syrian forces in rebel-held Idlib could unleash another wave of refugees to Europe. He said the Turkish military will leave Syria once a settlement to the conflict is reached. In Palestine, Israeli forces have wounded 87 Palestinians during weekly protests at the Gaza border. Medics say 44 demonstrators were shot with live rounds. A journalist and medics are among the wounded. The protesters were calling on Israel to lift its blockade of the Gaza Strip, imposed in 2007. Over 300 Palestinians have been killed since the weekly protests were launched in March 2018. Meanwhile, the US has announced it will impose sanctions on Lebanon and Oman aimed at closing off financing to Hezbollah and Hamas. The sanctions target Lebanon's Jamal Trust Bank, accusing it of acting as a key financier for Hezbollah. In a statement, the U.S. Treasury Department said the bank was a direct threat to the integrity of the Lebanese financial system. The department is also targeting Omani individuals, it says, are middlemen funneling cash to Hamas in Gaza. It says it will work with Lebanon's central bank to deny Hezbollah access to the international financial system. Lebanon's Finance Minister Ali Hassan Khalil said the banking sector can handle the impact of U.S. sanctions. The U.S. has also imposed sanctions on 2 people and 3 firms that helped North Korea evade United Nations curbs. The U.S. Treasury Department has blacklisted the Iranian oil tanker Adrian Darya and imposed sanctions on its captain. The ship has been at the center of a diplomatic controversy since it was seized by Gibraltar in July for busting EU sanctions on Syria. The Treasury Department says the vessel has been declared blocked property under an anti-terrorist order. It says anyone providing assistance to the tanker will be sanctioned by the United States. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the ship is heading towards Syria. The UN Atomic Watchdog says Iran has scaled down its compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal. In a report, the International Atomic Energy Agency said Tehran has exceeded the limits of both enriched and refined uranium. It said Iran's enriched uranium stock is still below the level it possessed before the deal. Iran's envoy to the IAEA says the new report verifies Tehran's commitment to the nuclear deal. Iran breached the enriched uranium stockpile limit in July in retaliation to the U.S. withdrawal from the accord last year. European signatories to Iran nuclear deal will meet today in an attempt to preserve the treaty. Britain, France and Germany will also discuss ways to protecting shipping in the Gulf. European foreign ministers will also be joined by EU diplomatic chief Federica Mogherini. The talks will take place on the sidelines of an ongoing EU defense meeting in Helsinki. The UK's Foreign Minister Dominic Raab says the meeting will build on the G7's positive talks on Iran. It says London will call for more international support to protect shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Earlier, Mogherini welcomed the notion of Iran-US talks on the condition of first preserving the deal. Now, a suicide attack has killed 6 southern separatists in Yemen's port city of Aden. The attacker crashed his bomb-laden motorbike into a vehicle driven by separatists. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack. This is the first such attack since separatists retook control of Aden from Yemeni government forces on August 10th. Earlier, Yemen's government asked Saudi Arabia to intercede with the UAE to stop its military support for the southern separatists. The UAE claims it launched airstrikes against terrorists who attacked coalition forces at Aden airport. The Yemen's defense minister says over 300 people were killed and wounded in the raids on Aden and Abyan provinces. More news to come after a short break. Stay tuned. Now, ancient human remains dating back more than 3,000 years have been discovered in Yemen's capital, Sana'a. Archaeologists found the bones and artifacts in the mountain ranges. But right now, we are moving to a new story. The Scottish court has rejected an application, immediate block on Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to suspend Britain's parliament. The judge said the case should be brought forward to early next week. Judge Raymond Doherty said the hearing, originally set for next Friday, will be heard in full on September 3rd. The British government has welcomed the court's decision. Other legal challenges are being mounted in Belfast and London. Former Prime Minister John Major has joined the case filed in London by legal campaigner Gina Miller. Their challenge to Johnson's suspension of Parliament will be heard on September 5th. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warns an attempt by MPs to stop a no-deal Brexit could make it more likely. In an interview, Johnson said keeping no-deal Brexit on the table strengthens Britain's position in reaching a new deal with the EU. It says the current deal is not feasible for the UK because it will maintain the status quo.
The current withdrawal agreement just doesn't work for the UK. It's been thrown out 3 times. It keeps us locked into EU law. It makes it impossible for us to run our own trade policy. It means basically that the UK could continue to be, as it were, bossed around by Brussels with no comeback.
In France, the government is holding a month-long rehearsal for Brexit in the northern port city of Calais. For this purpose, trucks carrying goods travel across the English Channel to Britain. The French authorities recruited 700 customs officials to ensure a smooth transition of goods in and out of the EU. With the risk of a no-deal Brexit rising, French customs officials will be on the front line during the transition. A French minister says the authorities will install barcode and license plate readers on the border. In the event of a no-deal Brexit, trade between Britain and the EU will default on the World Trade Organization's tariff system. Britain is due to leave the bloc on October 31st. In Russia, the Defense Ministry has released a video of a test firing of its new nuclear-capable cruise missile, Kalibr. The ministry claimed the missile has a range of 2,000 kilometers. The missile successfully hit its target after being fired during Navy drills in the Black Sea. The Defense Ministry says it has been designed for conflicts with other navies. However, if it is armed with nuclear warheads, the missile can wipe out cities from a great distance. A group of 155 migrants forced their way into Spain's North African enclave of Ceuta from Morocco. Some of them jumped over while others broke the fence bordering Morocco. 12 policemen who tried to stop them were injured. Several migrants who were also treated for minor injuries. A government spokesman says all the migrants are from sub-Saharan Africa. Since the beginning of the year, 671 migrants have arrived in Quetta. After entering Spain, refugees are usually taken to a migrant reception center where they can seek asylum. Now, Italy has allowed 66 migrants on board the rescue ship Mare Jonio to disembark, but Rome still refuses to lift its ban on the ship entering Italian waters. A Coast Guard patrol boat has transferred 66 women, children and sick migrants to the island of Lampedusa. Earlier, Italy's outgoing Interior Minister Matteo Salvini signed a decree banning the vessel. The Mare Jonio rescued 100 people off the Libyan coast on Wednesday. They include 22 children and 8 pregnant women. Now, in Colombia, security forces have killed 9 members of a dissident rebel faction in a raid in the southern San Vicente del Caguan region. President Ivan Duque says a clear message has been sent to the rebel leaders. Last week, dissident leaders of the FARC insurgent group rejected a 2016 peace agreement and announced a return to arms. Colombian President Duque said they authorized the military operation against the resurgent faction. He described them as a gang of narco-terrorist criminals challenging the government's writ. Over 2,000 FARC fighters refused to recognize the peace deal signed 3 years ago. The Swedish teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg has called for international solutions to stem global warming. The 16-year-old joined dozens of other young activists in New York, urging the world to join their cause. Thunberg sailed into New York on Wednesday after a 2-week journey from Britain on a zero-emission yacht. She criticized U.S. President Donald Trump, calling on him to understand the science behind global warming. Greta will attend a summit on zero emissions at the United Nations in September. Young climate activists also plan a large demonstration on September 20th. The World Health Organization says the ongoing fires in the Amazon rainforest is causing more respiratory problems, especially in children. Home to 30 million people, the Amazon has a fragile ecosystem providing vital food and water that is being threatened. WHO Director Dr. Maria says particle pollutants will remain in the air for a long time. She said people living closest to the fires have been evacuated. However, the inferno is unlikely to cause long-term health problems such as higher rates of cancer.
We're looking at what could be the short-term effects of this exposure to the smoke generated by the wildfire, and they will be more related to respiratory diseases, of course.
In Bolivia now, over 1 million hectares of tropical forests are on fire. President Evo Morales has joined firefighters in Santa Cruz as the country struggles to contain the blazes. Speaking to media, Morales said raging fires in Bolivia and Brazil are the responsibility of the world. The infernos have nearly doubled this year compared with 2018. Bolivia has contracted an American Boeing 747 supertanker to help fight the fires. It also mobilized more than 2,000 firefighters, small aircrafts and helicopters. Twitter chief executive and co-founder Jack Dorsey says his account had been cracked by hackers when it sent racist tweets to 4 million followers. A group called Chuckling Squad says it broke into Dorsey's account. The profile tweeted a thread of highly offensive and racist remarks about 15 minutes. Twitter says the phone number associated with the account was compromised. Twitter shares fell by less than 1% in after-hour trade following the hack. Now, NASA says the situation on the International Space Station is stable after emergency alarms went off. It says the crew and space station are in no immediate danger and are resuming normal operations. NASA says the overall atmosphere inside the space station remains below oxygen concentration limits. It says technical teams are working to identify what triggered the alarms. The International Space Station is currently manned by 6 astronauts from the US, Russia and the European Union. Factory activity in China has shrunk for a 4th consecutive month, reflecting the impact of the trade war with the US. The National Bureau of Statistics show the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index fell to 49.5% in August. Many economists had expected the index to stay put at the July level of 49.7. Any number below 50 points represents a fall in manufacturing activity. But China's services sector picked up for the first time in 5 months in August. The National Bureau of Statistics says the non-manufacturing purchasing managers index rose marginally to 53.8%. President Donald Trump says the Federal Reserve is harming the U.S. economy more than the trade wars could. President Trump says the Federal Reserve is allowing a strong dollar to make American exports less competitive. Hitting out at the central bank, the president said the U.S. does not have a tariff problem. Trump said European countries are getting a big export and manufacturing advantage as the euro falls against the dollar. The remarks came 2 days before Washington is due to impose new tariffs on Chinese products. Well, with that, we come to the end of the bulletin. For more news and updates, stay tuned with Indus News.